We are just over 24 hours away from the release of the first edition of the college football playoff rankings for this season. Ahead of that, our Dennis Dodd is out with his usual Monday power rankings. Michigan dethroned from top spot as Georgia's win over Florida moves them back to the summit. Ohio State up a few spots from 5 to 2. There you see Michigan, without playing a game, they fall to 3. Florida State sitting there at 4, and Washington jumping into the top 5. Let's now welcome in the author, Dennis Dodd and Danny Kanell here in studio. Dennis, glad to see that you survived the world's largest cocktail party on Saturday in Jacksonville. Danny's going to provide some feedback on these power rankings, but Dennis, I have to start with Michigan. You penalized them for having a bye week here.
I penalized them for having a bye week and for having a bad week. I thought in the court of public opinion, in terms of perception, there's integrity of the game issues involved. The fact that Georgia looks so good. And I can't wait till Tuesday night to see where the selection committee puts them. Having seen them live, and Danny, you know this, there's something about being there at game, seeing teams live. Quite impressive to me, poised to make another run at it, having seen them coming off the bye. But in good conscience, I guess I would say, I can't put Michigan up there this week.
So I totally agree with you. I have Georgia #1. I thought they really put a stamp on, their season so far. They looked impressive versus Kentucky. When Georgia is at their best, which I thought you saw the best version of Georgia without Brock Bowers, I think they're better than anybody in the country. Now, they've been very up and down, so that kind of adds some intrigue to it. But what I think is really interesting is you moved Ohio State up, because I was like, man, Ohio State did not look great against Wisconsin on the road. Kyle McCord had a couple interceptions. They didn't exactly blow them out. They beat them right on the number they were supposed to. And what you ended there with Michigan, to me, is a fascinating dynamic that we could see unfold. We don't know yet if people are going to, and when I say people, I mean the selection committee, but you are somebody who has an opinion about college football, and you say, you know what, I'm going to hold a little bit differently because there are integrity issues. I put an asterisk next to them. Like, until we learn more information, it looks really bad. At the very least, Connor Stalions was running this operation. What did Harbaugh know? So I've kind of said it's a story to keep an eye on. But what I'm fascinated to know is those committee members in that room, are they going to bring this up and potentially have a blemish on Michigan, who has been close to perfect on the football field?
Well, and let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that elephant in the room, because, Dennis, before we were coming on, you were saying that you spoke to a former member of the selection committee, and it will absolutely be discussed.
Yeah, I talked to a former member of the selection committee over the weekend, and that person told me that the Michigan situation absolutely has to be discussed. Now, he didn't weigh in on they will be penalized or whether they'll end up in the final rankings or the rankings this week. But this is such a unique and profound situation that you've got allegations, at least, of Michigan spying on the rest of the league to gain an advantage, and who knows how far that goes, that it has to be discussed in the room. And there's already been a published report that Bill Hancock said, the committee will have to, vaguely said, Bill Hancock, the executive director of the CFP, said, well, they will take everything into account. The fact that he didn't say it wouldn't be considered, I think, is significant. So I think on Tuesday night, guys, if you don't see Michigan in the top 2, we've got a heck of a talking point. And the spokesman, the chair of the selection committee, is going to have to answer some questions Tuesday night.
You know who I think is the opinion's going to probably hold the most weight as far as this? Not the administrators, not the athletic directors, but the former players and the former coaches who are in that room. Because I've talked to a few different coaches off the record, said, hey, what do you think of this? How serious this is? Because there is a narrative that everybody's trying to cheat. Every single coach I've talked to said not to these lengths, not the scope of which that is being accused that Michigan is going to. So that, to me, is one thing that absolutely the coaches in that room that have a voice, they will open up their mouth and they will let it be known. The question is, does it impact their ranking? Does it impact their ability to make the playoffs? I hope it doesn't, because until you know with clarity, which we may not know until after the season is over, I don't want to see the players penalized who may have no knowledge of what's happening.
And according to our partners at 24/7 Sports, Michigan have pulled their contract offer from Harbaugh until this situation has more clarity with it. Michigan welcome Purdue to the Big House this coming week in terms of on-the-field play. All right, let's get back to Dennis's rankings. Oregon, a team that jumped a few places. They go from 9 to 6, while Bama won, but stay at 8. Despite that, though, Dennis, you like the direction that both of these teams are headed.
I do. I mean, think how well Oregon is playing right now. You just don't walk into Rice-Eccles at Utah and win by 29, ending an 18-game home winning streak. We know how physical they play and really wreck Utah's plans for the season. I would submit that any normal thinking person could put Oregon in the top 3, but you can't right now. You've got Georgia, you've got Michigan, you've got those undefeated teams. Oregon lost a game by 3 points against Washington, but I think you can make a case for Oregon being better than Washington. And to see them at 6, it tells me, number one, it's a deep field, but that Oregon controls its own fate. I think if they follow the deal and finish the season and beat Washington, they're going to be right up there, because we know there's going to be an elimination game with Michigan and Ohio State. So I think they're playing as well as anybody right now. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Definitely, Dennis. I totally agree. You know, I thought there were 2 teams that really resonated over the weekend. Georgia with their statement win over Florida, but we knew what Georgia could be. Oregon is still a program that's trying to get back to where they once were in the playoff, and we're seeing Dan Lanning's impact really on both sides of the ball, the physicality on both sides, the ability to run the football, to go right downhill, and then defensively. And I know that Utah doesn't have their starting quarterback, Cam Rising, but Bryson Barnes played a lot of football this season. I thought that was the statement win of the weekend. And what is very interesting dynamic is you said something that I totally agree with. And there are 2 situations that are evolving between, rankings 5 through about 8, where you've got Oregon and Washington. You kind of have to keep Oregon below them because the head-to-head you have to honor. And the other one is Texas and Alabama. You have to have Texas ahead of Alabama, which you do, but that's another one. If those teams replayed, I probably would say, you know what, Bama is the better team, and they might get the best of a rematch. One of these we could see unfold. The other one we might not, because Oregon, Alabama, and Texas play in different conferences for now. But I totally agree with you. I just think it's one of those things. I'm curious to see if the committee, the further removed you are from those head-to-heads, if they say, you know what, we just think this team is better right now at this point in the season.
Oregon get Cal at home in Eugene this week. Alabama welcome LSU. That is a game that we will have for you on CBS. All right, Oklahoma were one of the weekend upsets. They justifiably tumbled from 4 to 9 in Dennis's latest rankings. What now for this Brent Venables team, Dennis?
Well, they've got some significant issues, I think, defensively. There were some game management issues at the end against Kansas, and they had time to prepare for this. I talked to an Oklahoma source today. It just seems like Kansas, even when they go blow out, they always play Oklahoma tough. This was a situation where you knew Kansas had a chance because they could score. And I think Jason Bean is becoming that starting quarterback. Jalen Daniels, we were worried all season about his back and when he can play. I think Kansas to the point right now that it's probably best to hold him out and preserve that redshirt year, because Jason Bean, who threw those 5 touchdown passes against Oklahoma State, all of 30 yards or more, is a big-time quarterback. I thought Oklahoma had solved its defensive issues for the most part against Texas. I know they gave up 27 points, but they're allowing 127 yards less per game than they were last year. So that result, guys, was huge, because I really think it puts the Big 12 on the precipice of the playoff. First Power 5 league without any undefeated teams. Really, Texas has to win out and seal the deal, because I think because of the loss, I think Oklahoma will not be given the benefit of the doubt between number 1 teams in that top 4. So I think it's really tough for the Big 12 right now.
I totally. If you're a Big 12 fan and you want to see a team in the playoff, I think it has to be Texas. Oklahoma, because of that win over Bama, that is a signature win. Oklahoma doesn't have that. Their non-conference nowhere near as tough, so they have to run the table to even be in the conversation, which I do think they would need some help. Here's the thing I'm worried about for Oklahoma. All that momentum they had going in the Texas game is completely evaporated. They felt like they silenced all the critics about, Brent Venables taking over and our defense is in a different place. Don't forget, not only did they lose this past weekend, but UCF had them on the ropes at home a week ago, and they didn't. That was the game you're supposed to bounce back and show that was fluky. Instead, they don't. They got very conservative late in that game. You mentioned it. They ran it 3 times and said, we'll just punt it away to Jason Bean. There were several instances in that game I just was not impressed. And watch out, because you talk about 2 teams going in different directions. The Sooners come limping into Bedlam, And all Mike Gundy has been, his opinion has been Oklahoma left in the still of the night. They didn't tell us. They totally, screwed over the conference, if you will. And he has said this is the last time we're going to play this team. The last version of Bedlam we'll see probably for the foreseeable future in Stillwater. Boy, Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, they would love nothing more to send Oklahoma off to the SEC with a big fat L in Bedlam.
Yeah, and speaking
Danny,
of Bedlam,
I totally agree. Real quick, let me jump in. I totally agree. 5-way tie in the Big 12 right now. I think Oklahoma State's playing as well as anybody. Mike Gundy still hasn't explained why Ollie Gordon didn't play earlier in the season. Now he looks like a Heisman Trophy winner, moving around quarterbacks. But in a grudge game, maybe the last for years, I like Oklahoma State in this game, and they may have a leg up to win this to get into the championship game.
Well, State sitting as 5.5-point underdogs as we head towards Bedlam. Danny Kanell, Dennis Dodd breaking down Dennis's latest power rankings, which are up with Dennis's expert analysis over on CBSSports.com. And for more on Week 9 and a look ahead to the CFP release, be sure to listen to the Cover 3 podcast. Chip Patterson, Tom Fornelli, Bud Elliott, and Danny Kanell going upon further review on Monday. You can download and follow wherever you get your podcasts.